To you two new people, I'd like to welcome you. And I don't want you to get the wrong idea. You're kind of coming in on the middle of something here that we have in progress. So sitting back and just relax and keep an open mind and come back. Don't let anything that goes on here tonight think we're a bunch of weirder people than we actually are. I failed last week to pass a little bit of information on that kind of helped me, and it had to do with one of the 7 deadly sins of sloth. I want to spend a little time, just a few minutes, talking about how you deal with sloth, or how I was able to successfully deal with sloth. And I was in a mental hospital somewhere, and I think, I don't even know why I was there, but a long time ago, I copied these things down off of a blackboard. I was there visiting someone, and I think it was somebody in my wife's family. And I hung on to them, and I was never able to use them until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. But what these 6 things were that I copied down off the blackboard, they were called the tools for self-esteem. And when I got sober and I had a seemingly permanent inability to do anything, I was incapable of picking up the telephone and making a phone call. I was incapable of talking on the phone unless my wife had screened the call first. I wouldn't answer it. And the simple things in life, it really had me bogged down. It says in the doctor's opinion that our problems pile up on us and become astonishingly difficult to solve. And that's the position I was in. It was like I had a list of things that I had to do right now in order to put my life in some kind of order so I could proceed to start to do something about these things that were troubling me and blocking me in life. And the list was so long that I didn't have anywhere to start. And finding a starting place was the key to the whole thing, and this helped me find a starting place. The first rule is to keep commitments. And when I copied these things down off the blackboard in that mental hospital, I didn't get any explanations with them. I kind of made these explanations up as I went so that they would fit my circumstances, and they worked for me. But not only keep commitments but to make commitments. And to make commitments that are reasonably attainable. And that would include both commitments to myself and commitments to others. So when I sat down and I started making out a list of things that I absolutely had to do that was so big that I couldn't even get started on it, I knew that something was wrong. So I read somewhere else that 3 things is about enough for anybody to do in any one day. 3 things other than the simple acts of living. So what I started doing every day was making a list of 3 things that I was going to accomplish that day. And believe me, they were simple things. I started making lists that had things on it like go to the post office and buy stamps to mail the bills with, because I had an inability to go to the post office and buy stamps. But if I could get that simple thing down on paper and make a commitment to myself that I would do that, and it seemed to give me some motivation. because there were only 3 things on that list, and all those things were reasonably attainable in one day. Sometimes that list of 3 things would take me 15 minutes to accomplish. Some days that list would take me 3 or all day long to accomplish. Some days I wasn't able to accomplish the 3 things that were on my list. But what that list gave me was a starting place, and I'd made no effort to rank priorities. All of my life, I have escaped sheer disaster at the last minute, and I always thought I'm a special person, because I would finally get on the telephone and I would call somebody and they would say, I have been trying to get in touch with you for 19 weeks, and if you hadn't called within the next 5 minutes, I was going to. And I would say, boy, something's looking out for me. I don't know what it is. What that proved to me when I look back on it, and that happened to me over and over again, I'd procrastinate until what I thought was the last minute and everything was lost, but I'd try and salvage it, and I was able to salvage it just by taking some action. But what that proved to me, that my instincts somewhere in my mind, I knew what was the most important thing to do without sitting down and putting priorities on things on a piece of paper. And the 3 things that I put down on that list were the things that just I put down on that piece of paper, and that was the sole reason for me to write them down. I just wrote them down. I didn't think about it. I said, what do I want to do today? What do I think I want to do today? What do I think I should do today? And without any more thought than that, I'd write down 3 things. And that got me going. And when I got some confidence that I could do 3 things in a day, when I started to get some rewards of keeping my commitments to myself, then I was able to include other things in my day that I hadn't put on the list. And one day I got to that big long list that I thought I could never start to work on, and there weren't many things left on it. And I finally had the courage to go to work on the tough things that I thought I could never face. And I didn't do this overnight. It took years. The second thing is to take risks. And I think I've said in this meeting before that the price of success in any human endeavor is the willingness to fail. I have to take a risk in order to live my life. If I walk up to you and put out my hand and say, I'm Ed Sutton, and you do not respond, then I have taken a risk, that you will either acknowledge me or you won't, or you will acknowledge me in a way that's acceptable to me, etc., etc., etc. It was a risk for me to make the effort to introduce myself to you. And that's a simple situation, but in the more complex situations, the risks get a little bit bigger, but facing risk is a part of life. Not recklessly putting myself in risky situations, but with some reason and prudence. I had to learn how to take a risk, because what had happened to me was that I had lost so much confidence in myself, and I was absolutely paralyzed by the fear of failure. And all I could do was sit on the couch and read a book or watch Phil Donahue or a rerun of Love Boat. Same shit I was doing when I was drunk. I was just as paralyzed sober as I was drunk. And the third thing is to make changes. And I've said in this meeting that life is a simple matter. It is about gathering evidence and using it. you do something and you see what happens. If you don't like what happens, then you do something else and see what happens. If you like what happens, keep doing it. You know? So I had to learn how to take this evidence that I was gathering about what results I could reasonably produce through the various actions that were available to me. You know, I had to find my way into the paths that I wanted to go. Wanted to go meaning where I could produce the results that were acceptable both to me and to other people. Number 4 is to forgive self. And we're going to talk more about this in step 8, but it is absolutely critical that I learned how to forgive myself. Not only for the failures of today, but for failures of a long time ago. And if you remember the 4 response values that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, I had to learn how to forgive others and stop carrying these resentments. And number 6, I had to learn how to take credit.
That's 5.
That's, huh?
This one.
I got to keep commitments, take risks, make changes, forgive self, forgive others. Take credit. Take credit when credit is given to me. If someone says you did a very nice job, then I had to learn how to say thank you very much. I did my best. I'm glad you appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoy it. Rather than making some kind of deprecating remark about the work I had done or the thing that I had done, like, who cares? And not only was I denying myself the reward of taking the credit when people gave it to me, I was depriving other people selfishly of the pleasure of noticing me, of giving me a compliment or of saying thank you. That's very important in human relations, this give and this take. If somebody gives me something, I've got to take it. Or it's a selfish act. That's all the time I want to spend on that. 7.
6. 7 deadly sins.
No.
Listen again?
Thanks, Norm.
No problem. Thank you.
For sure,
All right, everybody turn to page 68 in the big book. Down in the bottom paragraph, now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. And I would say that, in all modesty, I needed about as big of an overhaul as anybody. I had tried to elevate sex to an art form with therapeutic values and failed miserably in the attempt. Many of us need an overhaul there, and all of the things you hear, well, if it wasn't for men, I would be happy. Women can't live without them, can't live with them, et cetera, ad nauseum. And I don't know, and I don't know about anybody else, but the root of my problems that I had with the women in my life came primarily from problems with my attitudes about sex. And I had to go to work on those in Alcoholics Anonymous. It says, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. I have read a lot about sex and sex problems, and with the proper attitude and the proper motives and a deep study of what is written here in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous about sex. It's probably the best sex manual I've ever read. It's very simple, but it has to be put into action. It's very sensible, but it has to be put into action, and it requires sustained effort on my part. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. And I read this sentence. They think we do not have enough of it, and that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? And every human being has sex problems. In step 4 in the 12 and 12, I think you'll remember that it says nearly every emotional disturbance can be traced to a misdirected instinct. And it is very easy for our sex instinct to become misdirected because of the factors involved. Here are the instructions for taking or making the sex list in the 4th step. It says we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Now, when this book and the 12 and 12 were written, the sexual mores and sexual standards of sexual behavior were a little bit different than they are today. The sexual revolution had not occurred. The institution of marriage had not seemingly failed or succeeded. I don't know what we're in now, success or failure of marriage, but times were certainly different. If you have not done so, or when it is appropriate for you to do so, I would recommend that you read this book, Search for Serenity. This has it's a primer on a lot of things that trouble us. It was written by a very learned man that had been through the ringer and who is an alcoholic. It is not conference-approved literature. There's a lot of good information on here, and there's a couple of chapters on sex in here that you can get some insight into the sex games that people play and some of the things, some of the attitudes that trouble us about sex. One of the one of the ways that I got out of whack with sex, and most people do, is that it is very easy. It very easily becomes a subject of very complicated and involved fantasies. And fantasy is something that is different from creativity or imagination. Fantasy is something that cannot be reproduced in reality. Mickey Mouse is a fantasy. Okay? You can dress somebody up with big ears, but he ain't Mickey Mouse. So, when I've got these complicated fantasies running around in my head that I think are real, I'm trying to reproduce them in reality, and I am forever dissatisfied with the sex life I have because it ain't what I want. And I know what I want. I can see it up here. I even know their names. Who are you? What are you doing in my bed? You know, you're not her, the one I've got up here in my head. I think one of my favorite sexual fantasies is a 36-year-old with two twin 18-year-old daughters. But that, I'll talk about that at another meeting. I shouldn't have said that.
Which meeting?
So I have this elaborate fantasy game running around in my head that I've taken a lifetime to perfect. Perfect, rather, not perfect. Perfect. What I'd like to read a little bit, or not read, but some of the ways sex can be misused that's outlined in this book. Sex can be used as a means of aggression. And there's a very good discussion in here about how what the root of that is and what the result of it is. And here's the one that gets a lot of people in trouble. Sex can be used as a means of reassurance and security. You know, sex is a means of expressing love between a man and a woman that means something other than the physical act. And when you misuse these things, then bad things happen. Okay, another misuse is to satisfy curiosity. You know, this is what drives the pornography market, and I'd make no statement about whether it's good or it's bad, but certainly curiosity drives the pornography movement. Sex can become such a compulsion and a fantasy that pornography becomes the sex life and excludes human beings. And lastly, it's a means of rebellion. You know, and most of these things have their roots way back in our past somewhere, and we can't see, you know, what the origins of it are, and how it causes us to behave in ways that we don't even understand, or don't even know that we're understanding. All we know is that it's producing bad results. You know, something's wrong. And I say, hey, look at me. I tried as hard as I could, and it just didn't work out. You know, that's the way it always happens. It just never works out. So I had to start rooting around in this, trying to find out what was causing me my trouble. I like to read this back here on, if you want to turn back to it, I forget where in the hell it is. I just remembered it was in here. Back in step 8 and 9.
96.
Oh, somebody tore it out of my book. Oh, here it is, page 80.
Tony put it back.
80.
Yeah. You know, the last paragraph down there, it says the chances are that we have domestic troubles. And boy, I had some domestic troubles when I got sobered up. I had domestic troubles when I was drunk. I just didn't know it. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if in this respect alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. God does it ever. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? And I tell you what, if I hadn't found this paragraph when I did, I probably wouldn't be married to that woman today. You know, it says, how could she be anything else? And I thought, man, something's wrong with that woman. Something bad wrong with that woman. And what was wrong was me. You know, how could she be anything else? I had to get to work on what wore her out, made her resentful, and caused her to believe that I wasn't worth talking to. You know, I had to go to work on me. You know, and my sex behavior and many of my other behaviors, of course, when I got sober, weren't any different than when I was drinking. And I didn't understand. Well, I'm not drinking now. Why in the hell isn't she talking to me? Why is she worn out and all that shit? The husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Well, I told you times have changed. Now they start to look around in Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't have to go to nightclubs anymore. You know. And thank God somebody tipped me off to this because I had been rather faithful to my wife. No, not rather. I had been faithful to my wife in spite of me, because most other women didn't want anything to do with me. That was the primary cause. But so you're trying to get well in here. You leave the women alone. They're trying to get well too. And I thought that's pretty good advice. Because everywhere I went before, I'd gotten involved with the women, gotten in trouble. And I didn't want to get in any trouble. Because I'd made up my mind that I wanted to learn how to live sober. And I'd made up my mind that it didn't make a difference whether I died or not. So I didn't come into there and use this as a nightclub. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I got steered in the right direction. I probably would have made the wrong decision if somebody hadn't told me what to do, because every time I did something, it turned out backwards. So that's why I'm telling you now. This isn't a nightclub. This isn't a dating service. It's where you come to get well. Sex complicates it for everybody, even people who aren't involved. Creates gossip, creates misunderstandings and hurt feelings. It's just not the place for it. Perhaps he is having a secret and exciting affair with a girl who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. This paragraph kept me in my marriage and kept me faithful in my marriage, because my wife had gone through literal hell because of me. And I had to stop thinking that because I had quit drinking, that everything was going to be okay. I had to make some changes. And that's why I came in here, is to make some changes. Like I said, things have changed a little bit since this book was written, but how you form a relationship hasn't, and I like to talk about how a relationship is formed. And I have to draw pictures when I do this. I love to draw pictures. There's 5 stages, and when I talk about a relationship, it's a relationship that eventually evolves into a committed relationship between a man and a woman. This is how normal people usually do it. I say usually. This isn't 100%, but usually. If you want to do things logically, this is the logic to use. Okay? The first stage of a relationship is superficial. I misspelled that. I went to the University of Missouri for 6 years and I misspelled it. That doesn't say much for the University of Missouri. Superficial relationship is one that is extremely casual. Like you go to a store and buy a pack of cigarettes. You have a superficial relationship with the person behind the counter. You know, if you're standing out on the parking lot of a service station pumping gas and there's someone at the next pump and you strike up a conversation, that is a superficial relationship. It's one where there isn't any ongoing, contact. It's one where there isn't any emotional commitment. Now, these superficial relationships can get sick. Girl standing there pumping gas. I'm standing there pumping my gas. I say, "Hi, how are you?" She says, "Not so good. My husband beat me up last night and shot the dog." I said, "You're kidding." She says, "And that's not all. My mother's dying of cancer and I got fired." Oh, no. Now, this woman has presumed upon this superficial relationship. She has told me things that I didn't ask her about. I don't care. She has tried to provoke some emotional responses in me that she wasn't entitled to. Okay. So being a reasonable person, I will say, well, I sure hope things are better tomorrow for you, and I go pay for my gas and I leave. Here's what a sick person would do. Kidding! Oh, no! Can you use 100? And where's your husband? I'll kick his ass. I just get right up involved in it. And I'll fix it for you. And on that basis, I haven't presumed on a superficial relationship. I have committed an act of lunacy. But let's say I go buy a pack of cigarettes and I'm single. And And there's an attractive lady behind the counter, and I say, I'd like to buy a pack of Marlboros, and I say, what's your sign? I'm a Capricorn. And so we become engaged in a conversation. And I say, well, would you like to go to a movie? And she says, yes. Now I have a companion. I have just converted that superficial relationship into companionship. Okay? Companionships are conducted in safe environments. I ask her to go to the movie. There will be other people around. Safe environments being parties with other people there, movies, restaurants, bowling alleys, pool halls, motorcycle rallies, whatever. But there are other people around in companionships. For this reason, I don't know how crazy the bitch is. I don't know her from Adam's off ox. She might be Lorena Bobbitt II. So I want some protection. So I conduct this companionship over a reasonable period of time, which ain't 2 nights, because I need to find out how crazy she is. She needs to find out how crazy I am. Because everybody's crazy. It's just, how crazy are you? And can I live with your craziness? If you want to find out how crazy a person is, you hang out with them long enough until they have a crisis. Because in a crisis, I will become who I truly am. You got to look for what is the crisis. If this poor unsuspecting soul is sitting in my front seat and I have a flat tire, and I get the bumper jack out and I beat the hell out of the car, I'm probably a little too crazy for her if she isn't more crazy than me. There'd probably be some women who say, hey, that's great. I like that. Then I'd better be on the lookout. You're crazy. You're crazier than me. So what is the crisis? What prompted the crisis? Something rather insignificant, or is it something that is truly a crisis? And then what is the reaction? That'll tell you who a person really is. If I get out of the car to change the tire without murmuring a complaint, and she's in there, kicks the windshield out, she's crazy. So now, after a reasonable period of time of this companionship, and another aspect of the companionship is that the event is more important than the person. If I call her up and I say, would you like to go see the chicken liver that ate New York City? And she says, no, I've seen it. Would you like to go see something else? Barabbas works in the salt mines. I say, no, I want to see the chicken liver movie. I'll call you some other time. The movie is more important than she is. I want to go see it. She doesn't want to go, that's okay. Now, after a reasonable period of time in this companionship, we can move on to the friendship stage, where we've been through this, and nobody's so crazy that can't tolerate it, and we've had a little preliminary chit-chat about what our hopes and our dreams are, where we came from, who our mother and dad is, and that kind of stuff, getting to know each other. And now that we're in the friendship stage, we can start to take a few risks. You know, we can go spend some time alone together. We can go to parks, we can go up on the river, we can go over to each other's place. We can do some things together without the protection. And the person becomes more important than the event. You know, say you want to go to the movies. No, I really don't. Well, I want to go to the video store and get a pizza and we'll stay home. You're tired. Sounds good. Okay. So now I've got a friend, you know, that I can share some confidences with and get have some meaningful conversations about whatever interests us. You know, and I'm interested in what she's interested in. She's interested in what I'm interested in. And here comes the next stage. And the next stage is romantic love. We're in love, deeply in love. Can't live without each other. Now, in order to get to this romantic love stage, going through these first three stages, I have had to grit my teeth and hold my raging hormones in check. Because my sex instinct comes in a great respect from the hormonal activity in my body. I am not the slave of my hormones, though. God gave me a mind to use. You know, a male has a sexual thought every 45 seconds. You women think you got it tough. I never counted mine, but that's what the experts say. So I've got to use some self-restraint, some discipline, you know, if I want to end up with a meaningful relationship. You know, and after we go through this romantic, and I'm telling you, you ought to count, if you want to do this, you ought to count on about 6 months to get down to here. Maybe more. Now, after we've gone through the romantic love, and, you know, whether you end up getting married or you continue to see each other, then you come to the last stage, which is committed love. And committed love doesn't have anything to do with raging hormones. That pretty well has passed, although there's a deep sense of love where, you know, you can still experience that romantic love, but not at the hormonal level, probably. So the committed love is, you know, we're in this together, we're partners, your problems are my problems, and you're important, I'm not. What do you need to feel good about yourself? You know, don't walk on me, don't run all over me, don't make unreasonable demands. Don't be one thing one day and another thing the next. That ain't fair. But you're important to me, and I want you to be happy, and I'll see that I'll do my part. problem with all of this is that I go in and I buy a pack of cigarettes and I say, "Hi, how are you?" And 1 microsecond we get from here to here, and it's, "I'll show you mine if you'll show me yours." Baby, lay down and let me see what you got. And what people experience, and me included, is a bunch of failed sexual relationships. You know, with the frustration and the despair of nothing ever works out. Well, I was always attracted to crazy people. That wasn't the problem. I didn't know they were crazy until it was too late. You know, once I have given in and moved directly to romantic love, then I'm in jeopardy, because the sex aspect of a relationship changes all aspects of a relationship. And what I've done, I'm involved in a sexual relationship that has not been developed to the point where it has a chance of being meaningful. I like what they say in Search for Serenity here. It says the real test of a sexual relationship is this: does one deeply enjoy the other's presence after sexual needs have been satisfied? Good God, I woke up with some oxys and I said, no, I don't enjoy her presence. Is it good? Is it comfortable? Is it pleasurable just to be around each other? Are we friends? Do I like you? You know, who cares if I love you if I don't like you? You know. Is each a better person because they are together? In giving personality inventories to emotionally disturbed people, it is surprising to discover how many men and women state the belief that the degree of sexual attraction is the best indication of good prospects for marriage. You know, and we live in a society that is driven, an economic society that is driven by sex. You know, and we are trained from an early age that if we drink the right whiskey, if we drive the right car, put on the right aftershave lotion, wear the right pair of Levi's, that it ain't going to be no problem getting your drawers down. You know, it tells it to me every time I look around in the magazines, on billboards, on television, in the movies. I see other people behave that way in real life. You know, so I think that sex is the goal in my life. You know, and I'm not blaming society or business or anything else. That's just the facts as they are. You know? And I have to recognize what's influencing me and what's driving me. It would be foolish to suppose that sexual attraction plays little part in a happy marriage. But when we take one aspect of a marriage, the sexual part, and exaggerate it to the point of expecting perfection, we have seriously warped the substance of reality. You know, how many hours a day can you devote to sex? How many minutes? You know, so what it says is, yeah, sexual attraction is very important. And not only in a marriage, but, you know, let's live in today's society, in a relationship. But that isn't the relationship. You know, the sex part isn't the relationship. That is an expression of what the rest of the relationship is about. Well, I'm about to run out of time. Let's get back over here in the big book. Oh, on page 69. Children. They said that we were talking about, we got all this down on paper and looked at it, and Bill suggested that take a look at our selfishness, our dishonesty, our inconsideration. Who had we hurt? Who did we justify unjustifiably arouse, etc. And you know, those are good directions. But I have found in my own life and in other people's lives that there are sex problems that I had to deal with that I didn't cause. You know, that would not necessarily even wouldn't show up on the resentment list or on the sex list. But they are things that have shaped my attitudes about sex. So when I'm giving people instructions on how to take a 4-step, I suggest that they put down any sexual abuse that they've had in their earlier years, whether or not they're homosexual or not. And 90% of all men have had homosexual experiences somewhere between the onset of puberty and persisting maybe perhaps into the early 20s. It's a natural part of discovering sexuality. 60% of women have had homosexual experiences. It's not anything necessarily to be ashamed of. It's part of growing up, and our society considers it a taboo. It's not as much of a taboo as it once was, but there can be some bad feelings from the past. We need to take a look at those things. You know, things like extramarital affairs, rapes, masturbation can and is part of a healthy sex life. But there is a line where it isn't healthy. You know, and if you got some problems with sex, you want to get down to the bottom of, take a look. What am I doing? You know, what's making me feel bad? What's blocking me? You know, from getting out of this fantasy that I'm living in my head and getting into a meaningful sexual relationship. You know, because that's the goal of this sex problem list. And the 4th step is to allow me to become a sexual being that doesn't offend other people and myself with my sexual behavior. Let's go on and finish reading this. I wanted to read some other things in the 12 and 12, but we're not going to get there. It says, in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow towards it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing so. In other words, and this one just floored me, in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. It was an area in my life that I was troubled in, like many other areas of my life. It's like any other problem. It can be solved with my willingness and God's help. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. We don't give sex advice in Alcoholics Anonymous. We work towards an ideal that we have chosen between ourselves and God. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so. But this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and on our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to get drunk. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. And we see it over and over and over in Alcoholics Anonymous, where improper sexual behavior results in people getting drunk. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. That means managing those fantasies and those hormones. If we have been through our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. And I thank you very much for listening.